I was forced to clean out the old library and found love in the stacks. I messed up. I pretty much ruined my reputation at school and got chewed out by my principal and got punished. And now I had to give up time for sports to serve out my punishment. And of all the punishments she could have given me, I was stuck organizing books. Old dusty books. She might as well have called the cops on me. Maybe with this, you'll learn to be a little more tolerant of people who are different from you, Kai, Principal Lin told me. I was sitting across from her in her office and she was smiling at me. Once you're done clearing out the old library building, the LGBT+ will make it into their club room. I believe that is an accurate way to make up for what you've done, don't you? I just glared at her. What did I do to get punished? Well, it was complicated. I was one of the most popular guys at my school. I was your typical athletic, good-looking jock with a lot of superficial friends and a rebellious attitude. I was also a mess, internally though. See, I had an interesting relationship with my parents. They were Christians. That type of Christian. The type of Christian that hammered into their kid that the worst thing they could be was not a thief, a liar, a converter, or even a murderer. Those things could easily be forgiven. But being gay? Oh no, that was something else entirely. That made them an abomination, a mistake of nature, etc., etc. You must have heard it all before. I heard it a lot growing up. I heard it in church from the man at the pulpit. I saw it in my parents' eyes whenever a man they felt was a little too feminine walked by, or even when they saw a pair of people that were clearly a same-sex couple. Don't think I'll ever forget the day my mother screamed at two women who shared a quick kiss at the park. I was 10 when that happened. I caused a lot of trouble at school, but my parents didn't care. They didn't care because I wasn't a sinner, according to them. You could have been a homosexual. That day, Mom laughed when she stood there making dinner. Lord, I'd have a little troublemaker of a son over that any day. And because of this, I did my best to ignore that part of myself. I did everything I could not to admit it. On a good day, my self-hatred was, well, only directed at myself. On a bad day, though, I lashed out at everyone around me, which is why when a nice girl named Gia saw me staring at a poster for the new LGBT+ club and asked me if I was interested in joining, I freaked out and lashed out at her. I tore the poster off the wall and ripped it up and said, well, things I'm sure no one else wants to hear. And my punishment, I had to clear the old library on campus of all the books in it so it could be made into an LGBT+ club room. Of all things, books. Every day after school, I was expected to head to the old library and pack those stupid books up in boxes for 2 hours. I couldn't participate in any clubs until I was done either. It was a small building, but for one person, it was an annoying amount of work. Clearly, they didn't expect me to actually finish it all myself. They probably wanted me to work for a bit just to teach me a lesson. Still, it pissed me off. On my first day, I headed there with a pile of empty boxes in my arms. Angrily, I got to work until... You're not going to organize those? The strange voice nearly made me jump out of my skin. I turned and saw someone standing by the end of the shelf watching me. He was of average height and slender build, had pale skin and a mess of curly brown hair. His square glasses reflected the light pouring in from the open door. He looked familiar and was clearly a student. But what the hell was he doing here? What gives, man? How long have you been standing there? I demanded, angrily tossing the book I was holding onto the box. The other guy crossed his arms. I got here before you. His voice was quiet and gentle. Now he was even more familiar. Just where had I seen this guy before? Hang on, don't I know you? I asked. I doubt it. The boy stepped a bit closer. I could make out more of his face now, his brown eyes fixed on me. But you're Kai, right? Kai Reeves? I'm Sammy. We've got some classes together. Sammy. I stared at his face. I'd seen him a few times, but he was quiet. Like, really quiet. I was sure this was the first time I was even hearing his voice. What are you doing here? He added, one of his full eyebrows lifted in confusion. I should be asking you that, I snapped. I come here all the time, he answered, to read, but I've never seen you anywhere near this place before. To read? I was in disbelief. Sure enough, he had a novel in one of his hands. It didn't look like any of the old books around us, so it was one of his. Why would you do that here? This place is creepy. It's quiet. That was the only explanation he gave me. He looked back at the box full of books. Aren't you going to organize those? Again with that question. Why would I need to? I asked, irritated. They'll get damaged if you keep doing that. I don't care. Sammy cocked his head slightly. If you don't care about them, why are you packing them up? Ask your principal that. I went back to tossing books on the shelf. Sammy paused for a moment. Oh, you're being punished. For what? He asked. The question just reminded me of my own stupid mistake. I felt a flare of anger and turned to him, nostrils flaring. Aren't you supposed to be the quiet kid? Mind your business. Sammy blinked at me. Then he stepped back like he was scared, which he probably was. I was almost a head taller than him. Sorry, he mumbled. His grip on his book tightened, and he looked away from me. The nervous look on his face made me hesitate. I sighed and forced myself to relax. He was just curious. After all, I'd showed up at his reading spot. I couldn't for the life of me understand why someone would choose to hang out in a place like this, but it wouldn't kill me to be a little polite. He wasn't the reason I was in this situation. Sorry, I did something stupid. Now I gotta clear this place up so they can use it for the clubs. You're gonna have to find somewhere new to read in a couple weeks, bro. Maybe use the actual library. I was surprised. Sammy hadn't heard of what I'd done. I thought pretty much everyone at school had at that point. Maybe he was so lost in his books that he didn't know what was going on at all socially. For some reason, he was still lingering nearby. Was he so bothered by how I was handling the books? Hey, I started to speak, but he cut me off before I could finish my sentence. You're popular, right? Sammy asked. I looked at him again. He was staring at me now with an odd expression on his face. What kind of question was that? You know who I am, don't you? I asked in return. Sammy bit the inside of his cheek. Well, yeah. He looked like he was trying to will himself into saying something. Okay, so, do you need any help? Huh? Like, with the books. Since I won't be able to use this place anymore, I might as well help. Help would have been nice, but I didn't understand why he was suddenly offering, or what his offer had to do with his first question. At least, not until I thought about it for a moment. Oh, I smirked. What do you want? Is there a girl you like? You need a wingman or something? Sammy shook his head. Not at all, he laughed nervously. It's more like I need help with... Well, the thing is, I want to be like you. That was funny. I thought to myself how crappy was his life that he wanted to be anything like me. I was a mess, though I guess I didn't look it. Like me? I know I'm hot, but you're not bad looking yourself. Be happy with what you've got, I laughed. Sammy was quiet for a bit, giving me a look that was very much like a glare. I want to be popular, he clarified quietly, and I want to know how to be more confident, I guess. So the reason he wanted to help me out was because he wanted me to help him become a more confident and social person. I thought it was kind of dumb. After all, it's not like I knew some secret way to become popular. I barely knew why I was popular. But he seemed convinced that he could learn from me. I decided to go along with it. Extra help wouldn't be bad. So there was no harm in it. At least, that's what I thought. Sure enough, when I arrived the next day to start, Sammy was already there, rummaging through the bookshelf. When he heard me approach, he turned to face me. Good morning, Kai. Morning, I responded. He was seriously interested in those dusty books? What a weird kid. Was that why he needed my help with his social life? Look, Sammy, right? When he nodded, I continued. It's great that you want to help me, but I'll be honest, man, I have no idea how to teach you how to be confident. I think it's just one of those things that you have or you don't, you know? Sammy frowned at me. I've read that confidence is a skill that can be learned, he insisted quietly. I rolled my eyes. Yeah, well, that was in your books. This is real life. I trust my books a lot. If it's possible, then I want to try it, he paused. If you don't mind helping me, that is. I sighed and sent a glance upwards. Just who was this guy? For a shy kid, he was pretty stubborn. Well, I wasn't going to stop him if he was insisting on helping me. I just hope he didn't expect too much from me. We got to work. I would pull the books off the shelf and he would organize them and put them in the boxes. It seemed to be a lot less work for him than it was for me, mostly because he would check out every book I handed to him. So, how do you know what to say when you talk to people? His voice interrupted the silence in the room. I looked over at him. He was staring at the cover of a botany textbook. What? I frowned. I just say stuff. Yeah, but how do you make it not sound stupid? I don't know, man. Sometimes it does, I shrugged. You're talking to me just fine. I mostly get nervous with more than one person. Plus, I'm not really trying to be friends with you. Stubborn and brutally honest. Ouch. I couldn't help but laugh at how blunt he was, which caused him to frown. Well, the first thing you might want to do is talk to people you have stuff in common with, I said. 'Cause trust me, you're not going to get anywhere with guys like me if all you like is reading. Sammy seemed to mull over that for a second. All right, he mumbled. With that, he was back to organizing the books, looking like he was deep in thought about something. Seriously, what a weird kid. Kind of awkward too, but it was interesting to see someone having so much trouble with something that came so easy to me. Silently, I wondered to myself if I really could help him. A week later. Despite how annoying my punishment was, I started to get used to heading to the old building every day after the bell, and, to my surprise, I started to get used to Sammy's company. About a week after we had started cleaning the library, I decided to ask him something. Why do you want to be popular so badly? It's really not all that great, you know? I handed the books to him, and he arranged them neatly in the boxes, making the job a lot quicker than usual. He was sitting on the floor, his legs crossed. I don't know, we're graduating soon, you know? I don't want to leave high school without making a couple friends. That would be pretty sad, I think. He stopped talking suddenly and squinted. Some dust had stained his glasses. He took them off, and I was startled to see just how much bigger his eyes were underneath. He looked down and started wiping the lenses clean with his shirt. He probably had the longest eyelashes I'd ever seen on a guy. I looked away from him and went back to clearing the shelf. Yeah, well, having a lot of friends isn't all it's cracked up to be, I said. None of my friends on the soccer club have bothered with me since I got in trouble. I couldn't blame them after what I'd done, but it did kind of suck. The most advice I can give you is to find people who like what you like. There are lots of book kids here. You really might want to try the library sometime. Sammy sighed. When I looked down again, his glasses were on his lap, and he was tugging at one of his curls. It seemed to be a nervous habit of his. I know, but what do we even talk about? I see people I want to be friends with, but I don't know what to say to them. Do I just go, hey, I like books too, let's be friends? I rolled my eyes and sat beside him. Talk about overthinking. Honestly? Yeah, just do that. Sometimes it works, I said. But what if it doesn't? He turned his head to look at me. Then it doesn't. No big deal. I mean, you were able to talk to me the other day, even though there was a high chance I would have told you no, and I probably wouldn't have been polite about it. Right. Well, I was scared, but I didn't want to pass up that chance, so he trailed off. So you sucked it up and went for it even though you were scared, I finished for him. He paused before nodding. Then you should just keep doing that. Try to find someone who likes books and talk to them, I said. Sammy groaned and covered his face. All right, I'll give it a shot. God, this is so hard. I clapped him on the shoulder, amused. He was kind of pathetic, but in a funny way. Maybe it was the fact, at the time, I didn't really have anyone else to talk to, but I found it endearing. More endearing than I was willing to admit to myself. 3 weeks later, I soon realized there was another reason Sammy was happy to be helping me. He was actually interested in those old books. He would look at every single one that I handed to him, checking to see if it was something he was interested in. Hey, what's gonna happen to all these books, he asked me one day, staring at the latest box we had filled up. Don't know, I shrugged, stretching my arms over my head. They might throw them out. Really? When I looked down at Sammy, he was staring at me with actual genuine horror on his face. I burst out laughing. He looked like a grief-stricken parent or something. I couldn't hold it back. Oh my God, your face! I doubled over, wheezing out my words through my laughter. They're just books. Sammy huffed, offended. It's not funny. They might be old, but they're perfectly fine. They can't just throw them out. I straightened up, still grinning. That was a joke. I'm sorry. I actually don't know what they're going to do with them. Probably give them out or something. Sammy paused. He glanced at the box, then at me, then at the box again. Then, to my surprise, he stepped forward, grabbed a book from the pile, and tucked it under his arm. Since they're giving them out anyway, it's not going to be a problem if I just take this one, is it? He laughed nervously. I raised my brows. So he wasn't a complete goody two-shoes. That's technically school property, you know, I said. Sammy frowned. You're not going to tell anyone, are you? He asked, and before I could do anything to stop it, the thought popped up in my head. He's so cute. Nah, of course not, I said. He grinned and looked back at the book, flipping through it, and I felt a flutter in my chest. It felt good for just a second, and then it was terrifying. It was weird. I'd never experienced anything like a crush before. I didn't know how suddenly it could just show up and completely mess with your head. I was terrified. Every time I looked at him and felt something in my stomach, those butterflies in your belly I'd always heard about, it was always followed by a pang of fear. It couldn't be a crush. What would everyone back at home think if I turned out that I was gay, that I liked guys? The thought kept me up for hours at night. As the shelves of the library got emptier and emptier, we started hanging out outside of school too. After a day at the arcade, I walked him to the bus stop. "Hey, do you have a girlfriend?" he asked me suddenly. My heart practically jumped to my throat. Why was he asking about this? "No." "Why?" I answered slowly. When I looked at him, he was staring straight ahead, hands tucked in his pockets. "That's a shame. I was hoping you could give me some romance advice." He smiled slightly. I, on the other hand, frowned without even knowing it. "Romance? There's a girl after all?" Sammy shook his head. "No, a guy." For a second, it felt like the ground had disappeared from under my feet. It was when Sammy stopped walking that I realized I had stopped walking too. "What?" he asked, looking over at me. "Is that surprising?" "I mean, kind of," I tried to smile. "I didn't know you were..." "I'm bi, yeah." He paused. "That's not a problem, right?" Panicking, I quickly shook my head. "Of course not," I said, stepping to his side. "It just surprised me." "Oh," Sammy smiled. "Cool. Yeah, it's weird. I haven't had a crush in ages, but he's really cool. I don't have a chance, though." "Right," I replied, trying not to sound as bummed out as I felt. I barely knew how to feel. I certainly felt jealous. Jealous that he liked some other guy. But my own jealousy made me feel sick, so what if Sammy liked some other guy? It didn't have anything to do with me, and even worse, Sammy still didn't know why I had gotten in trouble. I was sure he would hate me if he found out, especially now. The idea of losing him made me feel sick, but I couldn't share any of these feelings with him. Of course, so I opted to just keep it to myself and be happy I had his company at all. That night when I got back home, my evening went from bad to worse. As I sat having dinner with my family, a character who was obviously gay showed up on the TV show we were watching. My dad immediately got up and turned the TV show off, angry. "I hate that it's just so normal to show that stuff on TV now," he complained as he sat back down. "Kids are watching, for Pete's sake." "It's a sign of the times, honey," my mom replied, sighing sadly. "We're going to see that kind of degeneracy everywhere now. We just have to make sure to protect our family." She looked at us kids with a stern expression, as if she was offended by the show on our behalf. "You have to make sure you don't get caught up in those worldly ways, all right? We've raised you better than that." We all nodded, and I felt like I was going to throw up. 2 months later. 2 months after I first started my punishment, Sammy and I packed up the last box. The shelves were now completely empty. I was free. Sammy was happier about it than I was. He waited for me while I went to talk to Principal Lynn, who had been keeping an eye on me. Well, not close enough of an eye to know that I had been getting help. She was surprised that I'd actually managed to do it all on my own. After she was done giving me the whole "I hope you've learned your lesson" talk, I met up with Sammy and we left school together. "Congratulations, you no longer have the best job ever," he said. I rolled my eyes. "And I've got some news," he continued. Unable to contain his joy anymore, he beamed. "I got invited to a party." I looked at him, shocked. When had he even gotten the time to be invited to a party? Actually, when had he gotten a friend to invite him in the first place? After a bit, he had stopped bringing up his desire to get popular. "By who?" I asked. Still smiling, Sammy pushed some of his hair out of his face. "I took your advice and decided to talk to this girl I've always wanted to be friends with, and it worked. We've been talking to each other a bit, and I think she really wants to be close friends. She invited me to a party she's throwing on Saturday. Apparently it's a pretty big thing." A big thing? I doubted Sammy's idea of a big party was the same as mine, but I decided not to say anything. I certainly hadn't heard of any party. "Yeah, I asked her if I could bring a +1 and she said it was fine, so..." He smiled sheepishly. "Let's go together, please. I might throw up if I go to something like that on my own." I couldn't help but smile. I was still as conflicted as ever. Still filled with guilt at the idea of disappointing my parents, scared of what they might say or do to me if they ever learned the truth. But Sammy was like... he was soothing. It felt as long as I had him, I'd be fine. And despite everything, I was so grateful for that. Saturday night came. As I arrived at the address Sammy had sent me, I heard music and voices coming from inside the house. Maybe it was a big thing and I just never heard about it. Sammy was waiting by the house. I went over and we both entered the house. There were about 20 people there, Not the biggest party I'd been to, but it was definitely big enough to make Sammy nervous. I decided I'd try my best to go help him feel relaxed. As I looked around, I noticed I couldn't see anyone I recognized. Made things a bit awkward, but it was for the best. It would probably be even more awkward if I spotted anyone I knew. And just as I thought that I heard a familiar bubbly voice, "Hey Sammy, you made it!" I turned and saw Sammy hugging a girl I recognized. It was Gia, the girl I had blown up at 2 months prior, and she looked over at me and I saw recognition on her face. I wished so badly that I could just disappear. Gia's warm expression turned cold. "What are you doing here?" Sammy pulled away from her, confused. He looked at me with eyes that asked for an explanation. "He's my friend, Kai." "I know who he is," Gia snapped, stepping back. "Sammy, how could you be friends with this guy? He's the one I told you about. He ripped up our poster." People were staring at us, but I couldn't care less about them. All I could focus on was Sammy, as realization dawned on his face. "Kai, is that true?" he asked me quietly. When I didn't answer, his disbelief changed to an emotion I had never seen on his face before: anger. "It is, isn't it? That's why you got into trouble." I swallowed the lump in my throat and tried to speak. Even though seeing Sammy look at me like that hurt so much, it felt like I might actually die. "Sammy, wait, I did do that, but..." No, I don't want to hear it." Sammy looked beyond betrayed. He looked struck, as if I'd hit him. Gia, I'm so sorry. I think I'm gonna have to leave." With that, he turned away from the both of us and made a beeline for the door. I tried to follow him, but I felt a hand grab my arm and pull me back. I looked back and saw Gia holding me back. "Dude, leave him alone." Frustrated, I shrugged her arm off and chased after Sammy. I managed to reach him just as he got to the front door, stepping in front of him and blocking his way. "Get out of my way," he spat. "Get out of my way. I don't want to hear anything you have to say to me. I thought you were cool." He looked like he was ready to cry. Knowing that I had hurt him was seriously ripping me apart. "Sammy, please, I did something awful, but it really isn't because... I'm not homophobic or anything, I swear." He glared at me. "Right, of course you're not. Then why would you do something like that? And then you purposely kept it secret from me. You knew what you were doing." How could I even start to explain to him everything that I had been going through? I was so close to losing him that scared me more than anything else had. It scared me so much that I blurted out the first thing that came to mind despite all the people still watching. "It's because I like you." Sammy stepped back stunned. I heard gasps around us. The music stopped. "I like you, and I've liked you for a while now. When I ripped that poster down, I was going through stuff, and..." I cursed and stepped back, now aware of all the eyes fixed on me. I felt my face grow red from embarrassment. I turned to the door and ran, not knowing what else to do. I left the house and sped down the street. I just wanted to hide from everything. I heard Sammy chasing me and calling after me. I didn't stop. I wanted to hide from him more than anything. Sammy eventually caught up with me when he found me at the local playground. I sat on one of the swings, using my legs to rock back and forth as I tried to calm down. I stared at my feet and the sand, not looking up even after I felt Sammy sit beside me. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. I just felt a gentle hand on my shoulder and the words started spilling out of me, and so did the tears. I came clean to him about everything. I said the words "I'm gay" out loud for the first time, even though I still felt sick when I did. I told him about my parents and my anxieties. I told him everything. He remained quiet the entire time, his hand not leaving my shoulder. Once I had nothing else to say, I buried my face in my hands. "I'm so sorry, man," I mumbled. Finally, he spoke. "I mean, you haven't done anything to me." "Of course I have. I've ruined things. We can't be friends anymore. Even if you aren't angry at me, I've made it awkward." "How?" Sammy asked. "How can you stay friends with someone you know who has a crush on you?" I looked up at him. He was staring at the sand. "Especially when you like someone else." Sammy finally looked at me. He smiled. "Kai, come on. What other guy do I know?" I was honestly scared I had been too obvious that day. I stared at him, blinking. Sammy sighed. "It's you, Kai. I like you," he said. Oh. I sat up straight. My eyes widened. I was the person Sammy liked. The one he thought was cool. I don't know what's gonna happen next. I've never experienced anything like this before, but my life has gotten better since I met you, so... Sammy's voice was gentle as he gave my shoulder a squeeze. He couldn't look me in the eye anymore, probably embarrassed by his own confession. "So, I'm gonna stay by your side and we'll figure things out, alright? I let out a slow breath and looked at my lap. Yeah, alright. Hesitantly, I reached up and took Sammy's hand in mine. He jolted in surprise before relaxing and lacing his fingers in mine. And at once, despite everything, it really did feel like everything was going to be okay. Sammy and I started dating after a week. Record timing, I know. It was so different. I joined the LGBT+ with Sammy, and he helped me when I apologized to Gia and made a new set of friends. I was the happiest I'd ever been in a while, and also the most terrified. Hiding your sexuality from your parents turned out to be more difficult than I thought. That new friend of yours, what's his name? When my mom asked me that, I felt my stomach drop. She was watching my face carefully. Sammy? Sammy, she frowned. Does he go to church? I cursed in my head. Oh no, was she suspecting something? No. Is that a big deal? Not all my friends are going to, go to church and stuff, I said, trying to maintain eye contact. I know, sweetie. He seems like a nice boy. He's just a little off, you know? She walked up to me and held my face. It was supposed to be a loving gesture, but it made my stomach churn. Just be careful, all right? I trust you to make the right decisions. She smiled at me. My throat felt too dry for me to speak, so I just nodded. With a smile, she kissed my forehead and left my room. When she was gone, I just sat on my bed and stared at the wall for a long time. It was hard. Sometimes I wish I had never come out of the closet at all. I wish I could go back into the closet. But my love for Sammy and the support he gave me became my strength, even though I had to be extra careful when it came to him. It's gonna be okay. We've got each other, right? Sammy would tell me. He would take my hand no matter what and squeeze as if he was trying to squeeze the fear right out of me. Right, I would respond. And even though I didn't know what the future held, he really made me believe it. While it was still scary, I started to get more comfortable with myself with help from Sammy, our friends, and the school counselor. The anxiety was no joke. I got my grades up with Sammy's help and dedicated myself to my sports too. My life turned around so much that when graduation came around, I managed to get into the same college as Sammy on a sports scholarship. I couldn't dream of ever getting as smart as him, even with his help. Once college started, I was going to be away from my parents with Sammy, and things would get messy. They would eventually learn the truth. I would tell them the truth. There would be ups and downs and downs and downs and downs, lots of downs. But even on my worst days, I was able to get up, look myself in the mirror and know that as long as I was alive, there was always a chance that everything would be okay. I just had to enjoy life as much as I could, and with Sammy, that was hardly a problem. The end. Are those who don't accept you for who you are really your family? Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become part of our Rainbow Force, and stay wholesome.